The first thing anyone noticed about the Interstellar Student Exchange Program was how wildly unprepared everyone was for Sports Day. It wasn't the logistics. No, the logistics were handled by the best minds Earth and the Galactic Assembly had to offer. The real disaster was cultural expectation. Adrian Teller, the program's assigned medic, saw it coming a mile away. He leaned against the side of the field tent, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold across the wide, dusty pitch. A dozen species, each built for wildly different environments, trying to play something that vaguely resembled capture the flag. There was a lot of confused shouting and more than a few minor collisions. Adrian sighed and adjusted the first aid kit slung over his shoulder. He wasn't supposed to intervene unless it got serious, which, judging by the way a blue-skinned Vitraxi was wobbling toward him, clutching its arm, it just might have. The Vitraxi, whose name was Lore, staggered up with wide, glassy eyes. Its arm hung at a weird angle, the skin around the elbow already turning a sickly purple. "Murder, murder, murder," Lore gasped, voice high and trembling. "Catastrophic limb trauma, immediate loss of function, terminal degradation imminent." Adrian knelt down calmly. All right, let me take a look." Lore shivered as Adrian gently touched its arm, checking for fractures. The arm moved stiffly, but it moved. No grinding sounds, no obvious breaks. "Relax," Adrian said. "It's a bad sprain at most. You're going to be fine." "Fine?" Lore screeched, drawing the attention of several nearby students, including a towering insectoid named Breek and a furry quadruped called Ulna. "Immediate amputation is standard protocol on Vitraxi." "Yeah, we don't do that here," Adrian said, rummaging through his bag. He pulled out an ice pack, cracked it with a snap, and wrapped it around Lore's elbow using a stretchy bandage. "Ice it and you'll be fine. Keep it elevated for a bit and no roughhousing." Lore blinked at the ice pack like Adrian had handed it a live grenade. This is treatment?" "Yep," Adrian said. "Come back if it gets worse." Lore wobbled back toward the sidelines, cradling its arm like it might drop off at any second. Breek leaned down and whispered something urgent to it, and Lore shook its head violently, pointing at Adrian. Adrian sighed again. He could already feel the judgment radiating from the alien students. He knew how it looked, a primitive human medic dismissing a grievous injury with a cold compress. But there was nothing seriously wrong. He had been trained at one of the top trauma centers in Houston. He knew a real emergency when he saw one. Things didn't settle down. Word spread fast among the students, and soon every stumble, scrape, and bump resulted in a parade to Adrian's tent. He treated a bruised tail, a jammed knee, and what turned out to be a mild allergic reaction to the local grass. Every time it was the same routine: examine, treat, reassure. The real trouble started when a game got particularly heated between two of the larger species. Breek, already tense from Lore's supposed brush with death, decided to take matters into his own claws during a disputed flag capture. Adrian heard the commotion before he saw it. Shouts, a heavy thud, and then a wet, meaty crunch. He dropped his sandwich and jogged toward the growing crowd. When he pushed through the circle of gasping students, he found a human exchange student, a lanky kid named Marcus, lying on the ground, clutching his ankle and grimacing in pain. "All right, make some room," Adrian said, kneeling beside him. "Marcus, talk to me." "Ankle." "I think it's bad," Marcus hissed, through gritted teeth. Adrian palpated the area carefully. Marcus flinched hard when he touched the outer side. Swelling was already setting in. "Okay, we're not guessing," Adrian muttered. "We're getting an X-ray." The aliens exchanged uneasy glances. Some of them whispered frantically to each other in their native tongues. Adrian waved for one of the other staff members, a stout woman named Elka, to bring the portable scanner. Within minutes, the image confirmed it a clean break in the fibula. Adrian sat back on his heels. "Broken. We need to splint it and get him to medical." Breek loomed behind him, antennae drooping. "Human bones. Are that fragile?" "Anybody's bones would break if you got slammed into like that," Adrian said, starting to stabilize the ankle. "Marcus will need a cast for about 6 weeks, maybe longer depending on healing." The aliens watched in stunned silence as Adrian worked. No emergency amputation, no frantic life-saving measures, just calm, methodical treatment. Marcus, pale and sweating, managed a weak grin. "Guess I'm sitting out the rest of sports day, huh?" "You're lucky it wasn't worse," Adrian said, taping the splint securely. "All right, let's get you up." Elka helped haul Marcus onto a stretcher. As they carried him away, Breek shuffled after them, wringing his claws. "I did not intend harm," Breek said, voice low. "I know," Adrian said. "It was an accident." Breek lowered his head but followed the stretcher all the way to the transport. He even insisted on riding along to the medical center. Back at the field, the mood shifted. Fewer students took the game seriously after that. The competitive edge dulled, replaced by cautious cooperation. Adrian stayed busy patching up minor injuries, but there were no more serious incidents. Later that evening, when the dust had settled and most of the students were lounging around the recreational dome, Adrian found himself cornered by a delegation. Lore, Breek, Ulna, and a few others. "We do not understand," Lore said, still cradling his bandaged arm. "You treat these injuries with ice and patience." "Yeah," Adrian said, sipping from a battered thermos. "That's usually enough." "But the damage," Ulna said, tail lashing anxiously. "The dislocation, the fracture." "Not every injury needs extreme measures," Adrian said. "Sometimes the body just needs time to heal. Our job's to support it, not replace every part that gets banged up." Breek tilted his head. "Your resilience is unexpected." Adrian laughed. "You should see how we handle paper cuts." There was a moment of blank silence before Ulna asked, "What is a paper cut?" Adrian opened his mouth, then thought better of it. "Trust me, you don't want to know." Lore looked at his wrapped elbow, then at Adrian. "And you are confident I will recover?" "Positive," Adrian said. "Sprains usually heal in a few weeks if you rest and follow instructions." Lore hesitated, then finally relaxed, settling onto one of the low benches. Over the next few days, as Marcus adjusted to crutches and Lore marveled at the slow but steady improvement in his arm, the alien students began to look at the human approach to injury with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Not because humans were invincible. If anything, Marcus's vivid bruising and slow hobble proved the opposite, but because humans simply accepted their frailty without panic. There was something unsettling about it, the way Adrian could slap an ice pack on a swollen limb and say with complete certainty, "You'll be fine," and mean it. In the quiet moments, when students gathered around the portable heaters and shared stories, Adrian caught glimpses of how differently the other species viewed their own bodies. On Vitraxi, even minor injuries were seen as signs of weakness, often leading to immediate prosthetic replacement. Breek's people believed in regenerative hibernation. If you broke a bone, you slept for a month. Ulna's species relied on external biological grafts grown in vats. The idea of simply enduring, of letting biology mend itself with time and ice, was almost revolutionary. By the end of the week, Lore was tentatively tossing a ball back and forth with Ulna, his elbow still wrapped, but functional. Marcus had a bright blue cast signed by half the student body in a dozen different scripts. Breek, guilt-ridden but determined, had taken to carrying Marcus's books without being asked. Adrian watched it all from the sidelines, arms folded, a small, tired smile on his face. He still had a long list of minor injuries to monitor, and there was talk of organizing a less competitive event next week, something involving cooperative obstacle courses and trust exercises. He had a feeling he'd be busy no matter what. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the field, Adrian packed up his kit and slung it over one shoulder. His knees ached, his back was sore, and he was pretty sure he was getting a sunburn. Still, as he walked back toward the main dome, he couldn't help but feel a quiet pride. Not for being tougher or smarter or better, but for showing in his own small way that sometimes strength wasn't about winning. Sometimes it was about healing, about patience, about believing that with a little care and a lot of time, things would get better. even if it just started with an ice pack. 3 days after the sports day incident, Adrian found himself sitting outside the infirmary tent, patching a rip in his uniform pants with a borrowed sewing kit. The field was quieter now, the wild energy that had filled it earlier in the week replaced by a more cautious, almost reverent atmosphere when the students passed the medical station. A shadow fell across his lap. He looked up to find Breek standing there, holding something awkwardly behind his back. "You got hurt?" Breek asked. Adrian shook his head. "Nah, just tore my pants climbing into the supply truck." Breek shifted, looking unsure. "I have brought a contribution." Before Adrian could ask, Breek produced a bundle of thick, waxy leaves, tied together with a strip of golden fiber. The leaves oozed a faint, sweet-smelling sap. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "Traditional remedy," Breek said. "For torn flesh or broken structures, it promotes rapid restoration." Adrian set down the sewing kit and accepted the bundle. The leaves were tough and slightly sticky. He resisted the urge to wipe his hands on his shirt. "Appreciate it," he said, "but my leg's fine. Uniform's another story." Breek's antennae wilted slightly. "It is not for your leg. It is for your work." Adrian blinked. "You mean for the patients?" "Yes. You have few resources. Your treatments are minimalistic." Adrian chuckled. "That's a polite way to put it." Breek looked genuinely concerned. "Is it not dangerous, relying on such simple methods?" It can be if you don't know what you're doing," Adrian said, "but usually less is better. Overcomplicating things causes more trouble than it solves." Breek hesitated, then lowered himself onto the bench beside Adrian, folding his spindly legs neatly. His carapace clicked softly. "In my culture," Breek said, "injury is seen as a failure of preparation. There is shame in vulnerability." Adrian threaded the needle carefully. "Yeah, I get that. Some people on Earth think the same way. But most of us figure getting hurt is just part of living." Breek watched intently as Adrian stitched the fabric. "You are not ashamed?" "Not of getting hurt," Adrian said. "Only of giving up." Breek was silent for a long moment, then said, "Marcus does not seem to be giving up." Adrian smiled without looking up. "Nope. He's been practicing speeding around on those crutches like he's training for a race." Breek tilted his head. "Is that advisable?" "Probably not," Adrian said, tying off the thread. "But try telling a teenager to take it easy." A sharp trill interrupted them. Lore approached, cradling a large, flat box in both hands. His elbow was unwrapped now, a faint bruise the only sign of his earlier panic. "Greetings, Medic Adrian," Lore said formally. "I bring an offering of gratitude." Adrian set the mended pants aside. "What's in the box?" "A culinary token of appreciation," Lore said, setting it down with a flourish. "Traditional Vetraxi sustenance for healers." Adrian lifted the lid cautiously. Inside was a pile of what looked like translucent wobbling cubes, each pulsing faintly in the sunlight. Breek leaned in. "Healing jelly." Adrian poked one tentatively. It jiggled. "Is it supposed to move like that?" "Yes," Lore said proudly. "It contains regenerative enzymes." Adrian weighed his options. Turning it down might insult them. Taking a bite might be worse. He compromised by picking up a cube and examining it closely. "It's very lively," he said diplomatically. "It accelerates cellular renewal by a factor of 3, Lore said. "You will be restored to peak form within a day." Adrian considered his sore back. Tempting. He popped the cube into his mouth. It tasted like a combination of mint, seawater, and static electricity. His eyes watered. Lore and Breek watched eagerly. "Unique flavor?" Adrian managed after swallowing. Lore beamed. "May your tissues rejoice." Breek seemed to relax slightly, his antennae perking up again. "Is our assistance acceptable?" Adrian leaned back, wiping his mouth. "Yeah. It's good to know we've got options if anyone else takes a tumble." Before they could respond, Olna bounded into view, her russet fur ruffled and her tail twitching wildly. "Urgency," she barked. "New incident." Adrian stood up immediately, grabbing his medkit. "Where?" "Obstacle course," Olna said, already turning to sprint back the way she came. Adrian and Breek followed at a jog, Lore trailing behind with surprising speed for his slender frame. They reached the obstacle field, a sprawl of uneven platforms, swinging ropes, and spiked balancing beams. A small crowd was gathered near one of the higher platforms. Adrian pushed through and found another human student, a wiry girl named Sasha, sitting on the ground clutching her wrist. Her face was pale, and she was breathing fast. "What happened?" Adrian asked, dropping to his knees beside her. "Missed the rope," Sasha said through gritted teeth. "Landed wrong." Adrian gently took her arm, palpating up from the wrist. Sasha winced but didn't pull away. He could feel swelling but no obvious deformity. "Looks like a bad sprain," he said. "Maybe a hairline fracture. We'll splint it and get an x-ray to be sure." Sasha nodded, biting her lip. Her teammates hovered nearby, looking guilty. Adrian pulled a lightweight splint from his bag and quickly secured her wrist. Breek handed him strips of cloth without being asked. Adrian wrapped them snugly, immobilizing the joint. "You're gonna be fine," he said, standing up. "Let's get you to the infirmary." Breek offered to carry her, but Sasha stubbornly insisted on walking with support. Adrian and Ulna flanked her carefully. As they made their way back, Lore fell into step beside Adrian. "You assessed the injury without invasive measures," Lore noted, clearly impressed. "Most of the time, you can tell a lot just by looking and touching carefully," Adrian said. "Save the fancy scanners for when you're unsure." Breek looked thoughtful. "Trust in simplicity." "Exactly," Adrian said. Back at the infirmary, Elka met them with the portable scanner. The image confirmed Adrian's guess. A minor fracture that would heal well with rest and a splint. Sasha, relieved, accepted a sling and instructions to avoid heavy activity. She even laughed when Ulna solemnly offered her a chunk of healing jelly. The rest of the day passed in a blur of checkups and organizing supplies. Breek and Lore stayed nearby, eager to assist but careful not to interfere. Adrian taught them how to apply simple bandages and how to recognize signs of more serious injuries. By nightfall, the infirmary tent was quiet again. Adrian sat outside with a mug of strong tea, watching the stars emerge overhead. Breek settled beside him, holding a battered notebook he had acquired from somewhere. "I wish to record the methods you have demonstrated," Breek said, "for future application." Adrian smiled tiredly. "Sure, happy to help." Breek opened the notebook and poised a thin stylus above the page. "What is the first principle of human field medicine?" Adrian thought for a moment. "Stay calm. Panic makes everything worse." Breek scribbled furiously, antennae twitching. "And the second? Do no more than necessary. The body knows how to heal. We're just there to give it a nudge." Breek nodded solemnly, writing it down. As the evening deepened, other students drifted by, some sitting down nearby, others simply listening from a distance. It wasn't an official lesson, but the quiet attention felt like one. Adrian leaned back, feeling the weight of the day settle into his bones. He had come here expecting to patch up scrapes and maybe teach basic first aid. He hadn't expected to become a living example of something much harder to teach: trust in the slow, stubborn processes of life itself. Above them, a meteor streaked across the sky, briefly illuminating the gathered students with a flash of silver light. Breek looked up, then turned a page in his notebook. "What is the third principle?" he asked. Adrian sipped his tea, savoring the warmth. "Never underestimate the power of an ice pack," he said. Breek recorded it diligently, and for the first time all day, Adrian let himself laugh. 2 days after Sasha's wrist incident, the infirmary tent had settled into an almost lazy rhythm. A few students trickled in with minor complaints, mostly blisters, sore muscles, and one case of sunburn on a particularly pale Avenari who hadn't realized Earth's sun wasn't filtered through 3 layers of atmospheric gas. Adrian treated them all with the same steady efficiency, finding a strange kind of peace in the mundane repetition. It was late afternoon when Breek showed up again, antennae twitching in a way Adrian hadn't seen before. Not anxious this time, more determined. "You have free time now?" Breek asked. Adrian leaned back on the folding chair, balancing a clipboard on his knee. "If this isn't a trick to get me to run another obstacle course, then yeah." "It is not a trick. It is a demonstration," Breek said. "We wish to show you our methods of injury management." Adrian set the clipboard down. "All right, let's see what you've got." Breek led him toward the side of the field where a group of students had gathered around a strange contraption. Lore, Olna, and 3 others Adrian hadn't met by name yet were busy arranging what looked like a small containment pod, no bigger than a closet, with tubes and blinking panels attached. "This is our rapid regenerative chamber," Lore said proudly. "It accelerates healing by inducing controlled metabolic overdrive." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Sounds fancy. What's it do exactly?" "Subject enters chamber. Cellular processes are stimulated to repair damage rapidly," Breek said. "Minor fractures correct within hours. Soft tissue injuries resolve even faster." Anna bounced on her hind legs. "We thought it would be impressive." "It is," Adrian said honestly. "But we treat things a little different." "We observed," Breek said. "We understand human methods are effective, but perhaps our technology can assist." Adrian studied the pod. It hummed faintly, the panels glowing an inviting green. "I'm not against new tools, but pushing the body too fast can cause other problems." Lore looked puzzled. "Such as?" "Scar tissue forming wrong, stress on the heart, overwhelming the immune system," Adrian said. "Healing isn't just fixing what's broken, it's rebuilding strong." The students exchanged uncertain glances. Ulna twitched her whiskers. "Would you permit a field test? On yourself?" Adrian laughed. "I'm not injured." "You have residual muscular strain," Lore said without hesitation. "Your gait indicates lumbar tension." Adrian blinked. "You've been spying on how I walk?" "Observing," Lloyd corrected primly. Adrian considered. His lower back had been aching more than usual thanks to hauling supplies and bending over patients all day. But stepping into an alien healing pod wasn't exactly standard procedure. Still, they were offering, and it was hard to say no to their hopeful faces. "All right," he said, "but if I come out with an extra arm, you're all writing the incident report." The students buzzed excitedly as Adrian kicked off his boots and stepped into the pod. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, lined with a soft gel-like material that adjusted to his shape. Breek tapped a few controls. "You may experience mild warmth." The door closed with a soft hiss. Instantly, the temperature rose to a pleasant, enveloping heat. Adrian felt a tingling in his spine, like the afterglow of a good stretch. He closed his eyes, breathing steadily. Outside, he could hear muffled voices debating settings and recalibrations. He opened one eye warily. "Nothing invasive, right?" he called. "Only stimulation of natural processes," Lore answered. The hum deepened, and Adrian felt a gentle pulse through his muscles. It wasn't unpleasant, just odd. Like being massaged from the inside out. After maybe 10 minutes, the door hissed open again. "Process complete," Olna said, peering in with wide, eager eyes. Adrian sat up cautiously. His back felt looser, the usual tightness conspicuously absent. He swung his legs out and stood, testing his weight. "No pain," he admitted. "Feels pretty good." The students beamed. "But," he added, "this wouldn't work for serious trauma. You can't rush deep healing without risking complications." Breek nodded. "We suspected as much, but even limited aid has value." Adrian clapped him lightly on the shoulder. "You're not wrong." As they packed up the pod, a few other students wandered over, drawn by the activity. One of them, a slim, crystalline being whose name Adrian hadn't caught yet, approached hesitantly. "Human Adrian," it said in a voice like wind through chimes. "May I inquire, how do you cope with the uncertainty of slow recovery?" Adrian sat down cross-legged on the grass, motioning for the others to join him. "You learn patience," he said. "You trust your body to do what it's designed for, and you don't let setbacks convince you that you're broken forever." The crystalline student tilted its head. "But the waiting, the vulnerability, it's scary," Adrian admitted. "But it also teaches you to value your strength when it returns. You earn it." Lore settled beside him, surprisingly graceful despite his gangly limbs. "Many of us have never considered that perspective. On Vitraxi, weakness is corrected immediately. And on Earth," Adrian said, "we believe resilience isn't about never breaking. It's about how you put yourself back together." There was a long pause as the students absorbed that. Ulna piped up. "Your methods require great trust in yourself," Adrian agreed. "And, in time." Griffey tapped his chin thoughtfully. "Perhaps we've been too reliant on intervention." "Maybe a balance is better," Adrian suggested. "Use your tech when it's really needed. Let nature handle the rest." The setting sun cast long golden beams across the field, the air cooling into a comfortable evening breeze. Someone passed around a container of local fruit, and for a while the group sat together, sharing stories of injuries, recoveries, and the strange lessons that came from both. As the stars pricked the sky, Breek handed Adrian a carefully folded piece of paper. "We compiled a record," Breek said, "of human medical principles for future reference." Adrian unfolded it. The handwriting was painstakingly neat, each principle listed clearly. "Remain calm. Do no more than necessary. Trust the body's natural healing. Patience is strength. Balance, intervention with endurance." At the bottom, in smaller script, was a final note, "And never underestimate an ice pack." Adrian laughed, folding the paper and tucking it into his jacket. He stood, stretching luxuriously, no hint of the earlier stiffness lingering. "You know," he said, "you're going to make damn fine medics someday." Breek's antennae lifted proudly. Lore preened. Ulna's tail made a delighted ripple through the grass. As the group slowly dispersed toward the dorms, Adrian lingered a moment longer, watching the sky deepen from violet to indigo. He felt a bone-deep satisfaction, the kind that didn't come from flashy victories or grand achievements, but from quiet, stubborn work that mattered. He hadn't come to this exchange program expecting to teach much. He certainly hadn't expected to learn anything new himself. But maybe that was the point. Healing wasn't about speed or perfection or even technology. It was about believing that broken things could mend, that with enough care, enough patience, and enough faith, even the deepest wounds could knit themselves whole again. He picked up his mug from the medical tent's step, still half full of cold tea, and took a sip. Still good. Still enough. Just like them,